Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video, and you know what time it is. It is time for a meta-analysis in PvP. What have the results of the ongoing PvP tuning had? Which specializations are big winners? Which specializations are big losers? And everything in between. And as always, if you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. Your support is greatly appreciated. Now, you can see that there was pretty significant tuning that came in here for PvP and PvE on May 6th, and it's been some time developing since then. And the main trend that we have seen is that Fury Warrior has completely fallen off of a cliff. It has gone into the abyss, into the mix of everything else down here. And seemingly the inverse effect has happened for Arms Warrior. Arms Warrior is climbing and climbing to the top of the charts in solo shuffle. When we look at Battleground Blitz, it's very similar. Arms Warrior taken straight to the top. Doesn't matter if it's Battlegrounds, doesn't matter if it's solo shuffle. Arms Warrior has taken the king position as far as popularity, which I do honestly find slightly strange in some sense, because I think that Arms Warrior is a very lobby dependent specialization. You can be extremely hard countered due to mages, due to shamans, due to hunters, due to devastation evokers, and even despite that, it's still rising in popularity. Now, the main reason I think that this is the case is because it's an RNG spec at the moment. Basically, all of your damage that is meaningful or impactful is coming through RNG off of execute. If you can execute someone for 50% of their HP, you don't really need to know how to do your rotation correctly for a large portion of the game, as long as that hit connects at the exact moment that you need it. So I think that that is really friendly to new players who may not be as good at the game, because you can kind of just flap around, and if you press your cooldowns, you might RNG a big crit that just kills somebody and KOs them. Now, that was the same case with Fury Warrior, and they stripped that mechanic out from Fury Warrior, and you can see pretty quickly that it just like dropped down into the pack with every other specialization. So I'm kind of anticipating that they're going to do some type of change for Arms Warrior in the same fashion. Now, I think Execute should hit hard, but I don't think it should be a variance of hits like a wet noodle or hits like you're getting hit by a mock truck going at max speed. There's too much variance in the RNG. So targeting variance, lowering that RNG threshold while still maintaining Execute as a decent chunky ability, I think is important. I also think upping the damage on deep wounds and rend and having a little bit more focus on bleed damage would be nice for Arms Warrior, because for me, Arms Warrior has always been just mounting up this big bleed on every target over time and getting them in execute range and chunking them. But at the moment, it's just like tickle, execute it. And it's way too much. So I do anticipate that there will be some changes. Unfortunately, though, that if those changes go live, it's probably going to have a severe consequence. You're probably going to drop pretty heavily. Now, Ret Paladin did also receive nerfs on May 6th, but still held in a strong position. An initial dip as people panicked, probably stopped queuing because they didn't know if Ret was going to be bad or not. And immediately they're like, oh, hey, wait, this is actually still good. We're going to continue playing this. And Ret Paladin still, even in Battleground Blitz, comes in at the second position. So right now, Ret Paladin, Arms Warrior, you guys are clear leaders. You can see that it indicates on the chart. I would say that Ret Paladin is way more well-rounded than Fury Warrior, especially for solo PvP content, whether it's 1v1ing, world PvP, dueling, I just said 1v1 twice, but BGs, arenas, like Ret Paladin is well-versed in all of that type of content, and I think it can really carry, and there's a giant spider on my wall, and I'm going to have to deal with this thing here pretty soon here, so it's a good thing that I got this fancy dandy wallet to be able to deal with this guy. Got to take the headset off, don't want to be doing anything too embarrassing. All right, we got him. You guys want to see him? You guys want to see the spider? This is a meta-analysis of a dead spider on the wall, okay? I don't know if you guys can see him. He's very tiny over there. Actually, he wasn't that big. I kind of made it seem like a big deal, so I wouldn't seem like a coward when I needed to go and squish him. But, like, you know, the small ones are more dangerous, all right? Small ones are more dangerous, so give me some credit there. So what were we talking about? Oh, yeah, Ret Paladin's best class in the game to play. So Ret Paladin's probably going to get some nerfs. Now, unfortunately, you know, with the way that the meta is going, if these two specs get heavy-handed nerfs today or next week, I think it probably depends on if they're happy or not with Mythic Plus tuning as well, if they're going to do another big embargo of tuning like they did on May 6th or not. Feral Druids and Mages, I think, at a tournament level, are going to really start to run the show. So, like, this is ladder play, but at tournament level, Ferals and Mage will really start running the show, and I am a bit concerned about that. But at the same time, I feel like there's issues with these specializations that are starting to trend them quite far out of control at the moment. So likely something is going to have to be done about it. When we go and we dive deeper into like melee and range, it's like the big picture, right? When we're looking at all specializations, those are the big outliers. But when we look at melee, obviously we're going to ignore Ret and Warrior because we just did it. The rest of the melee are starting to get a lot more balanced with each other. Windwalker, I just completed my Arms Warrior 2400 challenge, and it actually took me like 300 rounds. Like, it's taken me the most amount of rounds to get 2400 rating on Arms Warrior of any other specialization that I've played so far. And I've done at least, I think, 11 of them. I finished Destruction and Affliction Warlock as well this week. But it felt like it was like rock, paper, scissors, coin flipping RNG spec, where it's like you coin flip the lobby. If you get countered by it, you're sad. You coin flip the executes. If you get big ones, you win. So yeah, it seems like a casino spec at the moment. Windwalker is just really good and well-rounded. Havoc Demon Hunter is really good and well-rounded. Like, these guys are in healthy positions. Fury Warrior, honestly, like, it's fallen down to B tier, but I think it's just in a decent spot. And if they get the casino executes down on arms, that they're probably going to be pretty even with each other. I do think the loss of the Mortal Strike stacks keeping up, though, could maybe trend it continuing downward because it's really tough to actually maintain max stacks. Feral Druid continues to remain in a really healthy and solid position. Subtlety Rogue has taken a surprising position in my mind as really good at the moment. The only issue is in Shuffle is that enemies will screw up your stun DRs. That can be difficult to deal with, but if you're actually able to execute on it, I think it's actually still excelling quite well in Shuffle and in Battleground Blitz especially. Survival Hunter, I just played some 3v3 with Survival Hunter last night, and we were pushing into above Gladiator cutoff rating. I was playing Boomkin Survival, and it honestly felt pretty good. I will say Ret Warrior, these two guys at the top, whenever we queued into it, was extremely difficult. But for the most part, it actually didn't feel that bad. Survival seems to be kind of having a little bit of an uptick here. It used to be a lot lower than this. Seems to be doing it better. Frost Death Knight, this guy is kind of like a pub stomper. He's really good at low rating with the cooldown one shot against like Feast or Famine at the moment. I'm really hoping they could do something to get a little bit of damage out of their cooldowns and more into their sustain. But it's really good at stomping low rating. It's a good smurfing specialization, but as you get higher rated and players know how to dismantle your setups, it gets increasingly more difficult, but it can be good fun at low rating. Enhancement Shaman, still kind of hovering at the bottom, even despite the healing buffs that you received. I actually queued into a couple of these on the ladder when I was playing Boomkin Survival Hunter. Seems like they have decent healing output. It's still just not enough, and I would say like the limitations that you trade with Ret Paladin, it's just not worth it. The overall sustain and the ability to actually do damage from range is just a huge advantage that Ret has as far as a hybrid, right? Like Windwalker, Enhance, and Ret are all hybrid melee. They're all kind of competing with each other as far as what do they offer, what do they bring to the table. And Enhance is it's a little bit behind. I also think that likely that it's not a caster meta, right? There's no double casters. Enhance can sometimes do pretty decently in those types of metas. There's a lot of Warlocks, and it's really just not the case. Unholy DK, although its popularity here is pretty low, I actually think Unholy DK is not doing too terribly. I definitely don't think it's the best specialization. Still think you get crunched, but I've seen a couple of them doing better. So I feel like the balance is definitely getting there. We're getting really close to having the game in a really solid spot. Outlaw Rogue, though, you guys are still trending towards the bottom. I do think the nerfs to your cooldown reduction that they did earlier on, when like every single team in the tournament was an Outlaw Rogue, have definitely started to kind of have their mark be felt. Honestly, I think the compensation for Outlaw Rogue is probably increasing their damage. I don't want them to become immortal again like they were before. Immortal gameplay is just never fun, but bumping up their damage a little bit could definitely aid in putting them in a bit more of a competitive spot so that they're at least a little bit more competitive with subtlety. We're also kind of in a one-shot meta, and Outlaw is more of a sustained damage spec, so it's not surprising to see Outlaw Rogue a sustained damage spec at the bottom, Frost Unholy Death Knight sustained damage spec at the bottom. Enhance, it can be bursty, but its burst is like a 3-minute cooldown, and then you're not really doing a lot. The sustain's not really as relevant. So definitely some concerns with the changes for Fury's viability with the uptime of Mortal Strike, and these two outliers are probably going to, I would imagine, get snipped here in the near future. Now for ranged DPS, Frost Mage still trends at the top, but Marksman has taken a huge leap, and I'm not surprised because Marksmanship Hunter, much like Arms Warrior, can just get really big crits with aim shot, and doesn't really matter how good you are at Hunter. If you press aim shot and hits for 6 mil and the target dies, you're gonna get wins on those. And Marksman was one of the fastest 2400 challenges that I did, so I'm not so surprised to see that. It just does a really huge amount of damage. Again, it's much similar to arms. I think shifting some of the damage out of the modifiers that are applying to the crit damage of aim shot, putting it into arcane shot, putting it into some of their other abilities would definitely go a long way in as far as making it a bit healthier. So it's a little bit less RNG to interact with it. Frost Mage is still trending towards the top, and I imagine Frost and Ellie, which is the third top for ranged, they're going to be like most of the specializations that we see in the AWC for the tournament, but also we see it on the ladder as well, with quite a lot of representation. Although in Battleground Blitz, it seems like Boomkin ends up taking a little bit more of the control there, but these are your top 3 picks. They're definitely really good. I do think Boomkin is getting a lot better after playing it yesterday, and you can see that on the chart. It's jumping back up to 8.56, and I made that video predicting like which specializations are going to improve with the item level boost that came through, and I said Boomkin was one of the most benefiting ones, and that's because your haste is faster. Getting clones is a lot easier. So, and some of your specializations that counter you, like Unholy DK, are not that strong. So you're actually in a really good spot, and it's a one-shot meta. So Boomkin, Incarn, Star Surge, classic one-shot, definitely a really good spot, honestly, to be a Boomkin. Defense is still a little bit weak, a little bit shaky, but you can pre-bear, you run Tireless Pursuit, you kite, you preemptively avoid damage, or you watch my Boomkin guide on how to survive on the YouTube channel here. You can definitely make it work, and it's having a little bit of an upswing. Beast Mastery still holding in a healthy spot. Shadow, honestly, I feel like is a bit weak, and I think the main reason for that is just because the executes from Warriors, the Windwalker crits, these 2 classes in particular, Warrior and Windwalker, are really hard to deal with as Shadow. I completed the 2400 Shadow challenge, and it was really hard to deal with those classes. So it's still kind of holding steady because it can do really well outside of those situations. But at low rating, you're going to get absolutely clobbered by those specs. You're going to have a really steep learning curve in that type of environment. But it still has a lot of self-sustain outside of those situations. So a couple of tweaks, bringing down some of those big crits on those classes, and Shadow could skyrocket to the moon. So take that into consideration, but you gotta be really dedicated to Shadow right now. I've seen also some tweets from WizK about how he's playing Mastery Shadow Priest and how Shadow Priest is back or something like that. So maybe there's some tweaks going on there. There's also a weird Boomkin Wrath build that's starting to creep up where people are getting like 6 million Wrath crits. I don't know if maybe this has attributed to that. I didn't play that build. Maybe I'm going to try and look up that build for my stream tonight, which is in the description down below, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Devastation Evoker still holding steady throughout the middle. I think it's just really good, well-rounded specialization. The Infinite Freedom hovers is really good with how popular Warriors and Ret Paladins are, because you just can absolutely smother them and just never let them touch you, basically. Arcane's falling a little bit. I guess that's inversely with Marksman and Ellie going up, right? Because these 2 specs are typically hard for Arcane, but it's still really good. This is probably one of the best representation rates I've seen for Arcane, because it's considered to be one of the most complicated, maybe the most complicated ranged DPS to play effectively in PvP. And even despite that, it's still holding a steady mark. Destruction, I actually did the 2400 challenge on this. It can be really annoying. I think Warlock in general with melee DPS is just really annoying, especially if you queue on a week like this week where it's Blackrock Cold and Runes of Lordaeron and just small maps all the time. It's really frustrating. But in Battleground Blitz, I'll tell you right now, Destro Warlock was my favorite spec. I legit could probably like spam queue Battleground Blitz on Destro Lock 24/7. It is so fun. It's like the old days of Kobrak, where he's got the succubus and seducing targets, chaos bolting, blasting them, and just absolutely sending people. It's so much fun. I may actually commit a little bit more time to just doing Battleground Blitz with Destruction Warlock because of how fun it was in that environment. But I had a little bit of a better time in Arena, honestly, actually with Affliction. The set bonus that spreads your UA is really cool, and a lot of healers get punished now with the UA dispels that came in, but it's still just defense, right? Like, you get crunched by these Warriors. There's a lot of them. There's a lot of Windwalkers, increasingly more Demon Hunters. So those matchups are hard, but if you can get around it, manage to survive, watch some of my guides for those videos to try and pull it off, you can definitely start to make it work and have some fun with this. And Demo is actually the lowest represented Warlock spec, which is the spec that I'm now trying to do the 2400, my final 2400 challenge on, which I was saying is actually probably the best spec to deal with the current meta state with how many melee there are, and it's still at the lower end. Maybe it's also just a popularity thing. I do think a lot of Warlocks prefer Affliction or Destro, but you guys let me know if you're a Warlock main in the comments. Like, are you one of those guys who's a diehard Destro, it's all you play ever, or Affliction? And then Demo's kind of just like, if it happens to be too OP that you have to play it, you play it, or are you actually a Demo main? Because there definitely are Demo mains, but I feel like this is less overall. Maybe that's just a personal bias for myself, but it would be interesting to get the data on it. But all these range seemingly in a decent spot. Again, defense coming up for Death Knight Warlock, I think would be nice for some PvP changes. Just a little bit of an armor increase, just not only towards physical damage. I don't think they need to be more durable against casted damage by any means, but a little bit more durable to physical damage, or bringing down some of the RNG on Warrior again could help out Warlock as well. And then Fire Mage, you guys still just trending towards the bottom. And the only time I've ever seen Fire Mage feel threatening was in ranked 3s playing Rogue Mage Priest, and it's kind of just like, why wouldn't you just be Frost or Arcane, even in those positions? There's just no unique reason to bring it. I honestly think they need to bring back the Living Bomb AoE build for Fire Mage that they just completely gutted out of the game. I think a few months ago, it might have even been in Dragonflight, because that was the only way to make Fire feel unique, right? That was like the Cataclysm Fire Mage that just AoE'd and burned the world. I think that was a fun playstyle for Fire. That was a unique reason to bring it, and it brought interesting kind of flavors and combinations with other specializations, because right now it's just a Frost Mage clone that doesn't snare and only has one block. So it's like, do you want it to be a clone spec, or do you want it to have its unique flavor and reason to bring it? And I'm kind of surprised that AUG is still flying so low, because I think maybe it's just because it's a complete cheese spec, and if you don't know how to pull off the cheese, it's very hard to win. But if you know how to pull off the cheese, you can definitely make it win. So I don't know. AUG has ended up in this weird spot where it's like, I don't know why it's okay that they're just going to leave it like it is. Because it seems just really unhealthy. It either just completely one-shots when you stack up, or it's just kind of useless flapping around in the middle of PvP. But that's the general consensus for the ranged. General consensus for the melee is a little bit of defense buffs for Death Knight, maybe a little bit more of a damage buff for Enhance and Outlaw. Definitely would rather focus them on bringing them offense up for Enhance and Outlaw, but defense for Death Knight. Bring down some of the RNG for Arms. Got to probably bring down Ret a little bit. You probably need to bring down Mage too, even for some consideration, and change the RNG damage of Marksman. But even survivability on Ellie is pretty high relative to the rest of the range. So there's a couple of tweaks you could do that would likely bring all these lines really close, almost indiscernible with each other, which is the ideal case. When it comes to healers, they honestly are doing a really good job. I think that healer balance is becoming probably one of the best states we've seen, at least for solo PvP. We just see some weird things going on in Battleground Blitz, though. Like, what is this? Holy Priest is just jumping up the charts massively. This has got to be bugged with Mistweaver, though. So let's change the threshold here. Okay, yeah, it's bugged with Mistweaver. I was going to say, like, there's no way. So Prez is still flying low. No matter what, even if it's BGB or if it's solo shuffle. But every other healer is starting to get into a much more competitive position with each other. Week by week it's different as far as like which healer is taken to the top, which is really good for the game. You get another little buff in for Prez Evoker, maybe a little bit of like CC avoidance tools for Mistweaver Monk. Pull these guys up from the bottom, and I think that's going to be really good for the game. I think that's going to help out with the queue times. Seems like you can't really go too wrong with almost any of the healers except Prez. Feels bad. And I've been trying to complete the 2400 challenge on Prez. I already did it on Resto Druid. I did it on Holy Paladin. I did it on Resto Shaman. Prez has felt really difficult to keep up, but maybe again bringing down the RNG crit damage of some of the other specs as well could go a long way. With assisting Preservation Evoker, maybe they could also manually adjust the crowd control damage threshold. So they readjust in one of the most recent patches that it takes more damage to break crowd control, and that negatively impacts healers that have to play close range, like a Preservation Evoker, who used that AoE damage to outplay crowd control. So you might fly into a Frozen Orb to try and break a sheep, or fly into some AoE to break a Fear or something like that, and now those don't break as easily. So you don't really have counterplay for the limitations that your class has originally. So maybe something there could be looked at as well. There's also just the underlying fact that if you're running multiple melee DPS on a team, you're going to get AoE'd really hard. There's a lot of AoE in the game. So some type of universal PvP tuning knob towards avoidance to reduce the damage of area of effect damage in PvP might be nice as far as increasing kind of more comp viability, because right now it's pretty much only ranged melee and healer. I guess Ret Warrior is kind of the outlier there, but even Ret Warrior's ranged melee, man. Ret's a ranged. I think that's one of the reasons why that comp even works, because Ret can kind of play mostly from ranged and still be decently effective, and that's attributed to the AoE damage, I think, being too high. But overall, I think the game is not that far off. There are some big outliers, right? There's some pretty big obvious stuff, so I'd be disappointed if there wasn't some adjustments to address some of the obvious stuff. And maybe there's a little bit of more nuanced stuff that I think that could really accelerate the overall enjoyment. of the mode, but I think we're getting pretty close. There are some things that are obviously frustrating, but I think we're getting pretty close. So my hope is that there will be changes, and if there are, again, I'm going to be uploading them here on the channel, so if you don't want to miss them, make sure to just hit the subscribe button. Other than that, thank you guys very much for watching the video. Hope you guys enjoyed the discussion, and I will see you in the next one.